Okay, everyone who is watching this now at home, I am so sorry because we said we were going to record it. We had every intention of recording it for everyone at home to rewatch again, but I had one job to record it and I didn't do it. I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. So the first little, 10 minutes of so is not recorded live, and we're just going to retake it now as if it was the live thing. And we're all just going to piece it back together like it was the real thing. But I'm so sorry. It's crazy to see everyone here from all over the world. It's terrific. For a lot of you who are not from Melbourne, so Halad to Health is Melbourne based. If you haven't heard of us, that's probably because we're super new and we haven't been able to reach your area yet. So it's really cool to see everyone on this Halad to Health mock exam. So I guess because we're going to be spending the next 2 hours together, I think I'd take just 5 minutes to introduce you to sort of what we are at Halad, what we do, and sort of how the next 2 hours of straight content is going to look like, and just go over that. And in the meantime, just want you guys to make sure that you're all set to go by the end of the 5-minute intro. Just have all the technology ready to go to take the mock, as well as your pieces of A4 paper in front of you. So this is me. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Eliza and I'm the co-founder and managing director here at Halad to Health, which basically is just like a fancy name for when I was in university. I had this crazy idea to do a project with my friends, a humanitarian project to spread health education to areas where it was not accessible. And here we are a year and a half later, with an incredible growing non-for-profit, and really using that platform to make a difference in the world. And I guess it just means that I have the privilege of working with the incredible team behind Halad, who are doing incredible things every single day. And today I will be manning all of the back end stuff for you. So entering all of the live results, sending out all the access links to the parts of the mock exam. And if you have any questions directed about the admin side of things, I'll answer them in the chat. And this is Sarah. Sarah is our head of GAMSAT here at Halad, and she's also a Section 1 and Section 2 tutor, which means that she is the smart one. She leads a team of our 5 incredible tutors, and oversees all of their content, all of the creation of the courses, and does incredible free resources like this for you guys, because our team of GAMSAT tutors are very much, they were in your shoes, you know, literally 1 or 2 years ago, and now in different med schools, and they get it. You know, they have been there, done that. They really understand how much, you know, that dream means to people. And now that they've been able to achieve it, it's just their way of paying it forward and really creating things for you guys that they wish that they had. So, and Sarah today, she's going to be the one who's going to be running you through the 2 hours of straight content that we have ahead of us. So any content questions, straight to Sarah. This is Sarah on the weekends. I can never take that slide seriously. And this is Carleen. So Carleen is our operations manager here at Halad. And that basically means that she's the incredibly efficient one. She's the one who takes care of all of our students who come through, and makes sure that they have an incredible 11 out of 10 experience with us. And that, you know, Carleen is the one where she answers all the student inquiries. And if you have any matters, head to Carleen and she'll make things easy for you. She's the one who answers things in the speed of light. We don't know how she does it, but we're very, very grateful. So she'll look after you if you have any questions. And by the way, we're not a GAMSAT company whatsoever. Make it very clear from the start that we're not in the market to be able to, you know, exploit the fact that there are students who want to get into medicine out there. If anything, we're very much the opposite. We very much started off as a non-for-profit, giving free health education to some of the most disadvantaged students across the world. And we started it with rural Philippines. And that's where we started a year ago as a university project. And to be very, very honest, the true story is that when we did all this, my co-founder and I, after a year of running these humanitarian projects over there, we just were funding it all out of our own pocket, and we said this was just unsustainable. And so we had to find out a way to fund our mission trips and continue teaching students over there. And so we were just incredibly, incredibly lucky to have almost all of our students who came through our mission and taught with us in rural Philippines, they actually ended up going into medicine. And so we had this incredible pool of GAMSAT talent, and that's how we now fund the humanitarian work we do. So we take all of the tuition fees that go from our GAMSAT services to be able to make that impact somewhere else in the world. And we just thought, how incredible would it be if, you know, really the future doctors of this of the world could really make a difference now? And that's essentially what we're doing. And I guess all of the biggest difference that you might see with sort of us doing this now and what I would constitute like a GAMSAT company doing is, the biggest difference is that we truly just want to see you succeed and nothing else. I think you're going to experience down the line that Sarah is probably one of the people who, you know, is someone who wants to get you into medicine more than anyone else, or get you into dentistry more than anyone else. And so our tutors really have created all of this because this is something that they didn't have when they were going through their GAMSAT journey. It's something that we're very privileged now to be able to provide to you. So they just want to help. And today, the way that they're going to help is by this. So we're going to break up the next 2 hours by sections. So the first 15 minutes, you're going to sit 10 section 1 questions in 15 minutes. And then we're going to stop the clock. You're going to submit your answers. And Sarah is going to explain the questions and answers to you. And then in the back, I'm going to be tabulating all of the results that you've submitted in, and then create a sheet for you to see your personal score as well as the cohort's score. So you get that live results right back. Then we'll hop on to section 2, no break, straight into section 2. You'll get a prompt and you'll need to complete typing 1 introduction and 1 body paragraph for that essay or creative piece or whatnot you want to make out of it. You'll have 20 minutes to do that. We encourage that you take 3 to 5 minutes at least at the beginning to use that as planning time. And then in the next 20 minutes, Sarah will explain that prompt to you. And on the form that you submit the essay on, there will be a box that you can tick if you want your essay to be picked for live feedback, which Sarah will go through with the whole cohort of students here. If you do not want your essay to be picked, then you don't tick that box. But there will only be one or 2 students who will pick there. And in that last half hour, we'll go on to section 3, same thing, 10 questions, 15 minutes, all about original questions. And then Sarah will go through the explanation of that, and I'll be doing the live results at the end of that, and you guys can see straight away. Amazing. So now we're ready to get going into the content side of the mock. And if you're ready with all your pen paper, I'll hand it over to Sarah, and I'll also be uploading the instructions to you. Now, I've just realized that maybe you won't be able to see the instructions, so I'm going to put that under the description below, the time frame of things and the instruction to go with it.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Sarah from the future, I guess. So really sorry last night we didn't press record when we were going over the section 1 content, but I'm going to go over the same questions that we went over for the mini mock. So the content should be exactly the same regardless. So what I wanted to go over first was just some general tips, specifically to do with these questions and this style of question. So I deliberately included this text. It's a massive text and it's quite dry. It's a factual text about China's greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption, and it's not that exciting. And if you were to read a text like this on the GAMSAT before, when it was on paper, you could underline and break things up. But when it's on a screen, it poses a greater challenge because your eyes have to follow through with the passage. So what I told people during the mini mock was that I find it really helpful to break it down in my head as I go and sort of read it quite actively. So I start by asking myself, what is this about? And as I go along, I should be building on what I know about the topic that's being presented to me. So in this case, I'm reading along, and within the first paragraph, I should know that this has got something to do with China and China's greenhouse gas emissions. And so I've oriented myself to the ideas of the topic and what the topic is supposed to be about. From that, I then should be spending time on each paragraph and pausing or using each paragraph as kind of a checkpoint moment of what is this paragraph about? What extra information did they tell me in this paragraph? What did they tell me in this one? What did they tell me in this one, etc. And I'm going to show you an example of that for one of the questions. So one of the questions that a lot of people struggled with was question 2. So I'm going to go over that and use that to help illustrate my example or my tip or technique for text like this in section 1. So question 2 says, according to the text, a shift to renewable energy sources in China is only possible if, and then you had to pick the correct answer. Now, the text as a whole, if you were following through an active reading, you'd work out that the text as a whole is talking about why China has such high emissions and what could be done about it. So it's 2 main things, and there are a few reasons why which are given, and then what can be done about it is a lot of the text talks about policy and political reform and having new policies come through and people being on board with those. So it would be easy to think that option D is the answer because it talks about the political entities mandating a transition. So that sounds like a policy change. So that's good in a way if you were asking what is the text as a whole encouraging. But this specific question is asking about the shift to renewable energy. And this is when it would be helpful to know what each paragraph was specifically about. And if you look at paragraph 4 here, furthermore, efforts to improve energy efficiency and increase the share of renewable generation in the electric power sector indicate, and it goes on. So this is the paragraph you need to be looking at because this is the one that talks about China's limitations on why they might not be able to access renewable electric power yet. So if you'd known, oh, okay, paragraph 4 is the one about renewable energy sources and how China can access that, then you know that this is the paragraph you need to be finding your evidence from when you're answering question 2. So I look at this and I see the second part of it. I'm going to see if I can highlight it. Yep. China's power system lacks the flexibility in generation, pricing, and demand. And then it says a bit about that and then it talks about, and there need to be an acceptable cost and reliability. So basically what it's saying, and this is another great tip or technique I find, is you should be able to summarize a paragraph in a couple of words and in your own words. So not regurgitating the words that are there, but in your own words. And so what I understand from that is it's basically saying that they can't shift to renewable energy because they're not ready. And the reasons why they're not ready is because people don't want it bad enough and it's currently not cost effective. Now that I know why, we can look down at the options for question 2, and B stands out because it says there needs to be demand, and there needs to be demand by the right people. The right people would be the industry stakeholders because they'd be the ones actually utilizing it. And so that's why option B makes sense. Option A doesn't really make sense because economic growth isn't what's going to fix the demand and the reliability of cost or the good turnover of the use of the energy to generate a reasonable level of cost for it. So even though like China can get as rich as it wants to, but that still won't solve the need for renewable energy to be cost effective. So that's why A isn't really appropriate. And C just kind of doesn't make sense because nothing is mentioned about it in here. Even though an economic contribution towards renewable sources might be beneficial, nothing's mentioned in the text about other countries helping out to support that shift to renewable energy. So hopefully that helps give a little bit of context around how you can find evidence in a really massive text like this. All right, I'm going to move on to the cartoon. And questions 5 and 6 I'm going to address together, and a lot of people found questions 5 and 6 were also quite challenging. So I wanted to talk briefly about how I would approach a cartoon. Firstly, when you're approaching cartoons, you need to take everything into account. So you need to be looking at the character or at what is going on in the picture. You need to look at subtext or captions, and you need to be looking at facial expressions. And I think that's something a lot of people miss, is the facial expressions. So by looking at the facial expression there, you can get a lot out of the woman or the protagonist in the cartoon. She doesn't look particularly happy or excited or elated or anything like that. So I would rule out option D, surprised, immediately, and option A, immediately, because she's not feeling either of those ways just from her facial expression. Now, to choose between alone and concern, there's two things I thought about. The first is thinking about a movie montage and what that actually means. And she says, we're part of the movie, that's usually a montage. And I thought about, well, when do we usually see a movie montage? And we usually see them either during like high periods in someone's life, such as falling in love or them growing up or something like that, or we see it during low periods in someone's life. So they're having a really bad time, or they're feeling depressed, or they've lost someone. So she's in one of those. So we need to work out which one it is. You can kind of already tell from her facial expression, it's probably the one that's a little bit more dreary than the being excited, feeling like they've fallen in love. Okay, so all right. So then to work out whether she's either alone or concerned, the one thing that can help you work that out is that word, the first word in the caption, which says where in the part of the movie. She's on the telephone and she's using an inclusive word, where. So regardless of how she might look like she's alone and isolated, that is the biggest hint that she's not alone, and she's not expressing that the reason why she's part of a montage is because she's feeling alone. So that's how you rule out B. Cool. The second part is tone. Finding tone in things in section 1 can be really hard. It is an art and it's something to learn as you go. Something I find really helpful is to read something out and listen to how I sound and ask myself if I'm reading it out authentically compared with what's being presented before me. So that's something you can try. Obviously, you can't do it on the day, but you can try it and then you'll slowly get better at it and you can eventually do it in your head. In terms of the tone, you know that even again, just from the facial expression, she's not taking it as a joke. It's not humorous or lighthearted. She seems pretty sincere. To choose between serious and dejected, if you look at her, she doesn't look like she's given up just yet. She's talking to someone on the phone about it. She's not sitting slouched on the lounge with a depressed face. She's looking more concerned than anything. So that's why I'd go with A, serious and sincere. All right, let's finish off with one from question 3, at unit 3. So I think question 10 was the one that people found the hardest, and you needed to be able to answer this question, you needed to understand what anger can be an expensive luxury actually means. So what it's saying is that to be angry costs something, and luxury means that it's something that not everyone's able to access or not everyone can pay for. And so it's saying, okay, whatever it takes to be angry is something not everyone is willing or able to give. And so it wants you to think about, well, what is that cost of anger? And so options B and D, I would rule out because both of them talk about cost in quite a material term. So they talk about being rich and poor, which refers to cost in terms of a monetary value, which isn't really the same expense as anger being expensive. So if you chose the rich or the poor option, then you've kind of missed the point of the proverb saying that anger can be an expensive luxury. So let's look at the other two, A and C. A being that angry words are never forgotten, which is possible to match it because it could be that the expensive luxury is that people don't let you forget when you got angry with them, or that once you get angry, then though the things you say and the anger that you put forward is remembered by people, and with that comes the reputational cost. So that's possible. The other option is C. Anger is like a ruby thrown into a wasp's nest. So this one is like adding or putting a proverb as an option for you to match up and see if you can find it similar. And C is the answer, and I'll walk you through why. The reason why is because C best matches that anger can be an expensive luxury. Anger being like a ruby is that expense. And so anger being like something expensive, which in this case, the ruby would represent someone's reputation. So anger being like throwing your reputation into a wasp's nest. And so a wasp's nest is something that if you threw a rock or a ruby into the nest, all the wasps in there would start to get fired up and try to destroy whatever was thrown into there. And so that makes sense, because if you're throwing your reputation on the line as you get angry to respond, and the recipients are then going to get fired up, then that is like throwing anger into, or throwing a ruby into a wasp's nest as you get angry. And that encompasses both options A and C, because it's very likely that once you get that reaction to your anger, that also people won't forget it. So that better encapsulates why anger is an expensive luxury. All right, so also if there were any questions out of section 1 that you're still unclear about, we will be making our answer sheet with all of the explained answers available to you. So if I didn't go over one of them, or one of them is still a little bit confusing to you that I did go over, I encourage you to look at that. So that's the end of covering our section 1, and I will see you a bit later in the recording for section 2.
Okay, cool. So if, yeah, everyone can click submit, that would be good. Okay. And just while everyone's submitting their responses, what we'll be doing is I'm going to run you through a couple of points that I really wanted to bring up specifically in relation to this prompt, and then we'll pick one or two to have a look through people's actual responses and how people went with it. So firstly, hopefully you didn't find the prompt too difficult or confusing. I tried to make it fairly straightforward this time round. But I wanted to first bring up something that I think is really important and gets missed a bit when people do section 2 responses. Yeah, great question. And that's something that I wanted to chat about. Cool. So I guess something that's a big question in terms of GAMSAT is, can I focus on just one of the quotes in the prompt or in the task that I've been given, or do I have to understand all of them? And the question is, it depends. The answer is it depends. And I know people hate hearing that answer, but I'm going to give you an example now, and we'll also look at some of the text that people have written. So if you look at all of these, the prompts, in fact, oh no, you've all got it anyway, so I won't share it right now. But we've got creativity being a common theme. And then around that, there's also one quote, or one quote, which is number 4, which says, the most valuable thing you can make is a mistake. You can't learn anything from being perfect. And if you think about it, that still links in with the idea of creation and innovation and invention, but it doesn't specifically talk about creating something. And so then the question becomes, can I just write on that quote, or do I need to write something more? And the answer is, because that quote is a little bit standalone from the rest of the theme, if you just chose that quote and just wrote about making mistakes, you haven't quite understood that that's what the overarching topic needed to be. What's this question? Do you need to use the actual quote in your response? Absolutely not. The quotes are there to help you to decide what you think that the overarching topic needs to be, or what you need to be framing your ideas around when you write. So whilst you do not have to write a full-blown text response to the topic, so you definitely don't need to write creativity, here's all my ideas on creativity. You need to be able to understand that here they've given you 5 quotes which interlink, and you need to know how they interlink and then springboard from there, choosing how you're going to write. So if you were going to write an essay on making mistakes, which is fine, you need to recognize though that the prompts here more closely link in terms of creativity and innovation than they do about making mistakes. So if you are going to write about mistakes and failures, you need to write about them in some sort of context that has to do with innovation and creation and invention. Otherwise, you've missed the point of the topic and you've sort of gone on your own tangent and written about what you felt like, rather than acknowledging that they wanted you to mention something towards creativity, invention, innovation as the core of what they wanted you to talk about. Do you need to write essays? Absolutely not. And I realized halfway through that I didn't mention this beforehand. We said write an introduction and a body paragraph because we were like, oh, people won't have time maybe to write the whole thing. But if you prefer to write something creative, that's so fine. In fact, I have people who write songs, poems, prayers, conversations, blogs, plays, whatever. My rule of thumb or my tip there is that whatever you write, whatever style you write, should not over or supersede what you're actually trying to say. So if you're more focused on how amazingly creative you are, then you've missed the point of this task. And the point of this task is they want to hear what you have to say. But if you're better at writing something creative to convey the things you want to say, then by all means write something creative and practice doing that. Will we be able to see our responses again? If you like, I can organize for people to have their responses emailed them to them. We might do that. Yeah. More than ability to conform to your prompt. Okay, so just a couple more tips, and I'll also answer that question in terms of what they're looking for, because I think this is a common question in terms of section 2. They don't really care if you're really eloquent or if you're really amazing with your words. You can have really simple language and that's fine. You can include personal experiences and personal examples. What they're looking for is, can you think and reason and clearly convey your ideas the way that a health professional would? Because that's essentially what they're looking for. Do you have the qualities? Do you have the thinking styles that we can rely upon in this kind of occupation? And so they're not there to watch you write the next Shakespearean play. That's not what you've been asked to do in this text. They're asking, can you synthesize something in relation to the prompt that we've given you? So you are 100% able to show yourself, to be creative, to write something interesting. My only advice is have something to say, like have something that you're actively trying to say. You don't have to have an incredibly amazing contention. Just don't waffle on about, well, creativity, it's great, and this and that. You are able to go into something a bit niche, but just make sure you're addressing that you understood that the prompt was asking you about creativity and that it wanted you to identify something to do with innovation and invention. All right, I'm just going to check the grid. Okay, great question in terms of examples. I might just touch on examples and then we'll look at someone's text response. So examples are 100% great to include. The style of your example is up to you, whether you use a personal example, whether you use something that definitely like happened in the past, a historical example. If you use something a little bit more vague, that's fine, but it needs to tie in really strongly to what you're saying. So I always speak to my students about relevance of their examples and passion behind your example. So don't just chuck in an example for the sake of it. We definitely can tell when we write, when we read what you've written. Put in something that has meaning, has purpose, and is relevant. And I tell people when they write a practice essay, go home or go away from writing your practice essay and really look at how well you explored your example. And if it looks a bit too superficial, go and research it or go and find out something else about your example so that you can put it in more detail. Hypothetical examples, unless it's like a really amazing one, I would steer away from. But if that's all you've got on the day, I would still write it. If you can beforehand prepare something that's a little more concrete, do that. In terms of writing a title, that's definitely not true. You do not need a title. It can look extremely finessed and extremely stylish and very well executed if you do have a title, but please don't write a title just for the sake of it. I would like the title Like if I was reading your essay, I'd like the title to be very thought-provoking. So if you're just thinking like, oh, I'll just write the title is creativity is great, then leave the title off because no one wants to see that title. You can have as much or as little as you want. You do not need to follow a teal structure. You can write whatever structure you like. Just think about though, is what I've written clear? Is it understandable? Is it something that when people read it, they're like, oh, I get what he was trying to say or what she was trying to say. That's what's more important. You're not going to get extra marks for an amazing way that you broke up your body paragraphs. They want to see that you can write clearly and express yourself clearly. And however you choose to do that is up to you. All right, that's all I'm going to say in terms of general things. Here's a paragraph here. I'm just going to screen share and bring it up. And yes, they will be anonymous. So you won't have to worry about your response coming up. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to make sure my screen's sharing. I think this is the right one. Yep. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go over two. The first one I've already read, the second one I haven't. So bear with me when we get to the second one so I can quickly read it. But I really wanted to go over this first one because there's a couple things that I really like about it and a couple things that can be improved. So the first thing about it that I noticed was that they took on that quote number 4. So there's a lot in there about failure and making mistakes. And that's really good because they've acknowledged that and they're using that quote, and that's fine. But what's missing, especially from this introduction paragraph, is that they recognize the link between the creation and the innovation and the invention, which is that overarching theme. They've sort of missed that link and haven't put it in there, which would be very easy to achieve. They could just put in here a little bit more about creativity and invention and innovation in this first paragraph or in their introduction. So they have gone for a standard essay style, which is fine, and it's clear and it's good. And there's a rhetorical question here, which I like. I think sometimes it's nice to put them in when it's appropriate. So overall, that's okay. But the biggest thing I would say is if I was reading this and I had 2 minutes to read it, I'd go, well, where's the part about creativity, since that was in 4 of the quotes directly? So that's what I'd put in a little bit strongly. But then the second paragraph starts to bring that in a little bit more. So they start talking about creating an antibiotic. So it shows that this person was aware that creativity, invention, innovation was a key component of the theme. They just might have benefited from putting it a bit earlier on. So putting it in that introduction and teasing it a tiny bit. But this is a really good example. I like this example of the antibiotic penicillin. They clearly know something about it. It's interesting and it relates. They didn't just chuck it in as like, oh, I think I know this example, I'll just chuck it in. It matches, it works, and it shows that link between invention and creating something and serendipity and making mistakes. I'd probably, yes, I mean, the difficulty here is not being able to see people's whole essays. What I would say now is after everything that you've put, that you guys have written and put together tonight, that go away and write the rest of it, or at least put some dot points of what you would write next. In terms of what I'd write next is that this is currently quite superficial or surface level. It's, okay, mistakes can lead to creating something, which isn't extending much more beyond what the quotes were saying. So then I would start to dive into something a little bit more meaningful or interesting, such as the purpose of creation or the purpose of invention in our society, or things that start to thought-provoke to give more complexity to the essay. So that's what I would say about this one. All right, let's have a look at this one. Okay, cool. So this one I like that the paragraph, and hopefully you can also see this too, this introductory paragraph has a little bit more of a specific Oh, my words are gone right now. It's got a little bit more of a specific nod towards the creativity idea and the invention and innovation component. It is a little bit generic, talking about advances in technology, social reform, and medicine, but saying that it's setting up for something that's going to become more specific in the essay. So I don't have anything overly like that I would say that that's bad, that it's a little bit generic. Maybe you could put something interesting in there to grab the audience, something like a rhetorical question or something that is maybe a bit thought-provoking or teases out a little bit of what they're going to say, but it's good. It shows that you've understood what the overarching theme was and that you felt it was important to put it in the introduction. So if you're going to write this common like essay structure, then that's what needs to go in that intro. So that's really good. Then in the second paragraph, I think this is a good time to bring up the point of examples and what examples you use. When I first read this example, the Microsoft Office example by Bill Gates, I thought, well, don't use something too generic. And Bill Gates, everyone knows who Bill Gates is, so it's not quite as exciting reading that. But then as you went on, you wrote something interesting. You wrote he elected to defer his further studies, which I didn't know about. So see how, even though it's a fairly generic example, and if you just said, oh, Bill Gates made something really amazing and now he's a billionaire, that would have been a little too surface level, but then dove a little bit deeper and gave a little bit more in your example and said, actually, I know this about him and how it links in with this topic a little bit more strongly. That's what gives the finesse of a good example. So this is actually really good because this person has put in, now highlight this part here, put in this like additional taster sentence on the life of Bill Gates, rather than just saying something that everyone already knows about him, which everyone knows that Bill Gates has a lot to do with Microsoft and Microsoft Office. So that wouldn't be very exciting for me to read about, because I think, well, they just pulled that and everyone knows that. So let's see how there's something different in the example, something different that this person knows. Cool. And then they've linked this back in with hardships of Bill Gates and with innovation. Cool. I would say the same thing. I would hope that then the next paragraphs would extend on that and become something a bit more interesting and thought-provoking. The biggest sort of pitfall I can see with writing these is if someone were then to just keep writing paragraphs with more examples of people who've made mistakes in invention. And here's this invention they made despite their struggles. Here's another thing despite their struggles. So your essay should build, your ideas should build, and they should come up with something at the end that is inquisitive and interesting and thought-provoking. And it should show that you're able to think through something sequentially. So that's probably the biggest tip I'd give going forward to complete these tasks. All right, cool. I'm just, a couple of people in the waiting room just going to admit. If anyone had any questions at this stage, you just want to type them in the chat, or you can ask. Up to you. All right, I think there's none in the chat, so I might stop. Are we receiving any feedback on section 2? Cool. So what we will plan to do is we're going to look over people's, and we might, we're going to try and write a sentence or two on each person's. So, but how long that will take will probably be about a week, as opposed to instant feedback. Do you have any tips for checking over your essays now that it's going to be typed? Yeah, great question. Okay. So I have a couple of recommendations. You already know that. Cool. I also would, that's a really good one to ask about popular topics or generic topics. All right, let's have a quick chat about that. Okay, cool. So in terms of it being online and editing, the first thing I would say is please make sure that you are practicing writing your stuff online. So that's like 101, everyone should be writing that, or like on a computer now. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of editing, don't waste your time editing like, do I think my spelling's okay? They're not going to worry about your spelling. As long as the words seem logical, seem like, yep, that's a good word to put there, forget about it. They're not going to worry about what vocab you used. Against popular opinion, they don't care how eloquent you are. I've never met a doctor in my life that I've been like, wow, they're such a good doctor because they're so eloquent. So don't spend your editing time thinking what's a better synonym I can use, or is my grammar amazing, or did I spell this correctly? Not a good use of your time. Okay, next thing that I wanted to mention about that is because most of you anyway, if not all of you, should be able to type faster than you write, use the extra time to your advantage to edit and to go back. I would be editing paragraph by paragraph, but I'd wait till the end to do that edit. So like I would go back to edit and go, okay, I'm going to edit paragraph 1, paragraph 2, etc. What I would also recommend though is that after you write each paragraph, if you're doing a paragraph style piece, is to checkpoint yourself and ask yourself, am I staying on track? Because it's easy to just start to ramble as you type. So make sure you're checking, am I staying on track? Am I keeping to the contention that I wanted to say? So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I wanted to talk really quickly about popular topics. In terms of popular topics, I will say avoid them if you can, avoid generic topics. So think about the topics you learned in high school, don't talk about them. The topics that you learned in like your general like history crash course 101, forget about them. So that we don't want to read about Hitler and the Nazis anymore. We don't want to be reading about Shakespeare, Macbeth that you read in year 11 or year 12, those kinds of things. Think of something a bit more original. If you learnt something in Russian revolutions class in year 12, so did tens of thousands of other Victorian students, so don't write about that. If you are feeling like you're going to write about that, either you should have some sort of personal connection to it or something really interesting and unique to say about it. So they'd be the two caveats I'd have to writing about a popular topic, is if you have something really interesting, thought-provoking to say, then I would say it's okay to write about it. Exactly the same as any controversial topics. Only write about them if you have a personal connection to them and or you have something unique and interesting to say that isn't going to raise a red flag of you being a non-human person who's saying something really awful about a controversial topic. Okay. Liz, how much time do we have? Okay. We might leave it there. General, how personal can we be in task B? All right, yep, that might be the last thing I'd say. In terms of functionality, not really sure. I'm just saying to my students that if you just go in assuming that you won't have any of those functions like copy, paste and bolding, italics, titling, and practice if you won't. And then on the day you get them, then that's all the better. But you won't be disadvantaged if they don't have those options there for you. Okay. And you can definitely be personal. You can be personal in both tasks if you want to be. Just if you're personal, ask yourself, is this making me deviate from the point I really want to be saying, or is this adding to it? So you're being personal just for the sake of it, or you're doing it because it actually helps what you're saying. And that's what I'd say about that. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to section 3. And same deal, you're all experts at this now. Eliza's going to put a link in the chat for you, and then you'll have 15 minutes to do it. I'll put the timer up, and then we'll do a little bit of a debrief afterwards. All right, so make sure you click submit on your quiz form, and we'll just wait for those to come in briefly, and we'll go through some of them like we did with section 1. We'll focus on ones that seemed trickiest for people. And I'm actually going to share the screen of the questions because I think that helps with explaining for this section. Great, okay. All right, let's have a look. All right, so questions 1 and 2 were particularly tricky for people. So far, only 8 people got question 1 right and 10 people got question 2. So we might chat about that one a bit. And question 1 and 2 are your classic examples of Alicia Tellier's principle. So I might just bring this up. Okay. Cool. So the first thing, we might start with question 2 because I feel like that one might be a little bit easier to understand, and then we'll go back to question 1. So the only thing is, and actually I'll just use this as a quick little disclaimer. Is that still sharing? Yep. Disclaimer is that people often ask me and ask our tutors, how much should I know for section 3 and what kind of background knowledge should I have? There are a lot of things that can be quite confusing about how much you do and don't need to know. And our tutors spend a lot of time trying to work out what's the bare minimum that people can walk in knowing. And so there's no right or wrong of this is exactly how much you should or shouldn't know. But just to give you some context for a question like this, you should know that a pH is determined by hydrogen ions. And that's about all you need to know because the rest of this question should explain it. So in terms of you knowing how equilibrium works, that things move backwards and forwards, and that hydrogen ions, a higher amount will lead to a lower pH, is the only background information you should need to know to answer these questions. So that's just to give you some context of how much should I be delving into a chemistry or a physics topic when I don't know what's going on. This is probably what I would know about this to answer these questions. So for question 2, a person's blood pH is measured to be pH 7.3, which of the following is the most likely to occur? Well, what we know is that pH 7.3 is lower than pH 7.4, which is the neutral level that they've given you. So you don't need to memorize that 7.4 is natural or neutral or physiological for a human body because it gives it to you. All you need to know is it's lower. So then you need to ask yourself something. What's going to happen in terms of this equilibrium equation because of what it's saying? And it's saying pH is 7.3, so it's low, which means when pH is low, and here's your one prior knowledge thing I said you needed to know, that means that hydrogen ions are high. So here we've got a high H plus going on. So because of that, something has to happen with our equilibrium to improve things. And so then what's going to happen is that this will shift back here. And so I hope you can see my cursor, but your hydrogen ions will decrease so that we can bring that pH back up by moving back this way. And so we'll move back towards carbon dioxide. As a natural result, you can't just move the hydrogen over without moving the bicarbonate over as well. So unfortunately, the bicarbonate loses out a bit and that one's going to move over too. And that's why D is the answer, because the carbonate or the bicarbonate ions will decrease as they get shunted over or moved back to create more carbon dioxide to bring that pH back up and to essentially get rid of those excess hydrogen ions that have accumulated. Cool. All right, same deal with question 1. There was one note that they left for me, decrease. Okay, same deal. pH has decreased, so we've got too much hydrogen going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase getting rid of the carbon dioxide because the person's exercising. So what do? They start to breathe more. Get rid of the carbon dioxide so that you can push this back this way and keep producing more carbon dioxide. So if you remove some of the carbon dioxide, it forces this to keep going that way and to get rid of the excess hydrogen ions there. As a result, your ventilation rate will increase and to bring it back to normal. And because you're increasing your ventilation rate, you're increasing the amount of oxygen that you're also breathing in. And so your pressure of oxygen will also increase. The note that I was given was that this is a misleading diagram or a trick diagram because this diagram is designed to tell you a little bit more about partial pressures of oxygen and how they change in different atmospheres. Whereas when you go and exercise, the atmosphere doesn't change. So you shouldn't actually be worrying too much about partial pressures of oxygen with this question. Okay, let's have a look. And as I said, also, we'll give you the explained answers as well after this, if there's parts that you're still a bit confused about. All right, question 9, which this is actually a really good question, and 11 people got it right. So let's have a look at question 9. Okay. All right, so this is all about setting up, and this is really common in the GAMSAT. They'll give you some random as question. I've never heard of this in my life. When I read through it, I was like, I don't know what this is, but it doesn't matter because they should give you enough context and information for you to be able to problem solve and work through it. So let's jump to question 9, and I know that this might be like jumping a little bit, and if you hadn't quite understood the whole thing, it might be a little bit confusing as I go over right now, but hopefully it clears it up a little bit. So question 9 asks, in the experimental setup described in figure 2, in order to obtain 5 cell clusters, what's the material's vibration wavelength? Okay, so currently the thing that you need to know is that nodes are the points where cell clusters occur. And so that means that in this current figure, we only have 3 cell clusters. So your best, or my best advice would be, use that piece of paper and redraw a diagram out. So redraw a figure 2 of your own, but make it so that you have 5 cell clusters. And I don't have one drawn out now, but it would have to look like 1, 2, if you're following my cursor, so that you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cell clusters, which means that you're getting 2 waves in instead of 1. So if currently 1 wave is 24 centimeters, and then you've changed it to 2 waves is 24 centimeters, then 1 wave will now be 12 centimeters. So you've basically halved their length so that you can fit 5 cell clusters instead of 3, or in other words, 5 nodes instead of 3 nodes. So I know that's a bit of a tricky question, and I think the tricky part is having to make that assumption of what a cell cluster is. And the way that you can work that out is by them talking about the fact that cells congregate at these nodes because they're sort of stuck there and they're stationary. All right, let's maybe look for one more that people struggled with. Okay, I think maybe question 10 would be a good one to go over. Yeah, which 18 people got correct. And I'm just going to add this person in. Okay. What is happening and what is going to happen? Yep, great question. All right, we'll cover that in a second then. Cool. Question 10 is a classic bring everything together question. It requires you to kind of look at all of the diagrams they've given you and read the information and know what's going on, and then bring it all together and do some calculation. And I used to hate these questions, and it really can be discouraging when you look at it and you're like, I just don't know where to start. I would recommend that you leave, if you struggle with that, you leave these questions for the last one to do and see if the other questions help you to sort of keep contextualizing the question as you go. So what's happening is that the standard wave is at the 5th harmonic length. So I'd start with that part, and up here, they mention harmonic lengths here. So N being your harmonic length. And so that means that you can stick N now as 5 because that is your harmonic length. And I'll see if I can bring up the equation actually for you. All right. And so that means that your denominator for this lovely wavelength equation here will now be 5. And then L, we know, is 24 centimeters. We're going to put that in meters because it says wavelength in meters here to make it 0.24. So then when you plug that all in and do some handy calculating on your scrap piece of paper, you should get that the wavelength is equal to 0.086. So that's just by going 2 times 0.24 divided by 5. Once you find out 0.086, which I have written down here, I definitely didn't do it off the top of my head. That is not something you need to do for the GAMSAT. It then asks you the next bit. What phase angle is needed to displace the cells by 0.5 of the wavelength? So you found the wavelength, it's 0.086. Now you need 0.5 of that. So it's 0.043 is half of that. Again, just half it on your piece of paper, use your scrap paper to your advantage. Now that we know it's 0.043, jump up to the diagrams and you need to work out which one you need. In this case, it's this one. And so what you're going to do is, you know now that it's 0.043 meters. The displacement's in millimeters, so change it to millimeters. It's 43 millimeters, which is just under the 45. So you can grab your pen or whatever, draw across, like on your screen, and then drop down, and it's just above 180. And that was done really roughly, but I mean, that's the same as most of the GAMSAT. It's pretty rough because you don't get a ruler. So go down like that. There we go. We're around 180. And if you have a look, none of the other options are even close to that. So we know that it's 180. So this is a classic. Once you know what to do, it's not that hard. The hard part is knowing what to do. What I like to do is break it up kind of like I did. So start with this part and go, wait, do I know what that 5th harmonic bit means? Am I still confused? Do I know what's going on? And challenge myself and see if I can fit that into something I already know, which I already knew about this wavelength equation, and sure enough, it fit into the equation. So that's how I would go about those. Next question. Yes, but times it I mean, that's a great question. I will double check on the calculator. This part of the calculation was just given to me. Times 0.24. Okay, great point. Thank you, Kevin. I will let them know that the calculation is slightly off. Still, it's exactly the same method. So if you half that, then you'll get, is it 0.048? Yep. So it would be a little bit higher. It would be up here. And so then that would be there. So sorry about that. We'll just have to let them know to fix that calculation. Cool. All right, 2 great questions to finish this off, or maybe 3. Yep. How do you manage timing? Great question. I think that changes for everyone. For me, I liked to just work from the start to the end, and if I got really stuck on something, leave it and move on. Other people, that doesn't work. I have so many students who know that like bio style questions they're best at, I'll start with this, or chem style questions I'll start with, or whatever type you're really strong at. Other people like to read the text, like the stem, in their reading time, and then they know like what ones they've sort of had to digest in their reading time. So how do I bring that together into a helpful tip? My tip is to try all of them and work out which one am I best with, which one doesn't freak me out as much, which one am I most efficient with. In terms of timing, people do a lot of things like, oh, well, I have, a minute and a bit to answer each question, and they try and stick to that. But you can really stress yourself out if you see a question like this that you struggle with, and then you're like, I'm not fitting my time anymore, I'm not going to finish. Forget about it. Forget about watching the clock. Yes, it's important not to run down the clock by focusing on something you can't solve, but don't use the clock as your reason why you have to stop and move on to the next thing. So if you are choosing to do things in order, take your time to do it properly. I would say to my students, I would rather people do things properly and correctly than rush and get them all wrong. So basically, my biggest tip is take your time over the next 8 weeks before you sit the GAMSAT to work out which technique works best for me, and stick to your technique on the day. Trust that it will work because you know what it is. So work out your time management technique. But yes, for me, it works just to work from front to back, but I know tons of other people who don't do that and they switch between. And what kind of maths techniques you should know. It's been a couple of years since I sat the GAMSAT, so I wouldn't be as fresh on the exact techniques that you'd need compared to our tutors who do section 3 currently, but very minimal. So you should, firstly, you know that you don't get a calculator, so it should be things that you can write by hand. And secondly, you should know your basic algebra, you should know BODMAS, and you should know how to put things, so substitute things in equations. A lot of questions are substituting and rearranging. So basic algebra stuff like that is an awesome place to start. Yeah, please see the distribution. Liz, do you have that distribution almost ready? That distribution should be up pretty soon, and it will be on that same link from earlier. We'll put the link back. Yeah, there it is. Cool. And how do you practice? Yeah, we might finish on this one. How do you practice drawing accurate inferences from longer questions? I feel that I never draw out the right information from the question. So firstly, the hardest part, and the thing I hate saying to people, is practice. Practicing it and practicing getting yourself in that headspace is golden, number 1. Beyond that, how do you keep showing yourself how to problem solve in the correct way? I think sometimes people rush or they panic. So they're the 2 things I find, rushing and panicking. And neither of those are helpful things. So take a step back, and similar as when we went through that massive text for section 1, the China text with the emissions, I'd break it down. And so even this question, when the section 3 tutors submitted this question to me, I looked at it, and I don't really like physics stuff and this kind of stuff. And I was like, no, I don't really want to deal with that question. But when I started reading through it and breaking it down, it made sense to me. If you need to, however you break things down, maybe it's a diagram, maybe it's a flow chart, whatever you need to do, draw it out if you need to. But basically, same deal as section 1, using checkpoints along the way. So for this part here, this is a lot of information. I'd start by doing maybe half of it and going, do I get what this is about? And when I read it, I'm like, okay, probably the most important part there is that there's pressure nodes between 2 standing waves. I don't quite know what that means yet, but I think I know what it's trying to tell me about. So as you go on, tell yourself the bits of information that you're being given. That's probably the biggest thing that I found helpful, was knowing what information was already there for me. So when I got to the questions, like question 10, and it says fifth harmonic, I'm not like, what the heck is the fifth harmonic? I remember that that was something they told me about, and now I know how and where to use it. So that's probably the biggest thing I would do to help. Okay. So we might end up there in terms of I'll stop sharing my screen here, in terms of the mock itself. What I wanted to do before we say goodbye for the evening, or whatever time zone you might be in, is I want you all to jump onto the chat now and write one thing that you found helpful. One thing that you were like, oh, this is cool, or this is an interesting tip, or this is something I'm going to try, whatever it might be for you. I would just love to see it in the comments. I've got the wrong slide. There you go. And congratulations, you did our mock exam, or our little condensed version of it at the very least. Yeah, awesome. The verbal time reminder. If you're struggling with time, maybe tell yourself that after 5 questions, you're going to check the time. That's something I always had to do, because I forget to check the clock. So I like put a little mark on that. Okay, after question 10, I'm going to check the time and see how I'm going. Yeah. Facial expression is key. All right, what I'm going to do just to finish up, and thank you so much for coming, I'm going to hand it back over to Eliza just to say a couple of things, and then we'll let you go.
Amazing. Cool. Well, I'm so glad to see in these comments that everyone has taken so much out of this and learned something new over the last hour. And yes, I'm going to re-echo, thank you so much, Sarah, for your time and just sharing with all these students. I honestly don't think you'll meet someone who wants to get people into med school than Sarah. And I think you guys have just like all witnessed that. So really, you know, what I guess from here, I hope what you guys just witnessed was that we really do want to help each and every one of you, I guess, on forth with your journey into whether it's med school or dentistry or whatnot in your own countries and states. So someone asked a question earlier about what are some extra resources that you could point us to. So if we hop to the next slide, Sarah's going to control the slides from here. Next. So she went forward. Next one. Yeah, there we go. So the first thing that you can do is definitely to join our Facebook community, because that's actually where we're going to put a heap ton of our free resources up on. So make sure you join that. I'm actually going to link you to that right now. Let me just quickly find the link. Here you go. It's totally an open group. Doesn't matter which country, state you're in. You don't have to be a Halad student at all. We really just want to use this Facebook's, I guess, group to be able to just hear what are some things that you guys need help with, so that we can actually create something that will help you with that, whether it's specific to a section or just with study tips or whatnot. There is already a ton of free resources on there, from a calendar, for example, that has all the deadlines for Australian med schools to apply to, and this we live update so that you don't have to search through all the application deadlines. I'm going to drop the link in there if you want it. There's also recordings to our past webinars that have been all about the changes to GAMSAT now that it's online. I'm going to drop the link in there too if you want that. So all those kind of things are in our Facebook group, and you are more than welcome to join it. And we always encourage, so all of our tutors are actually in that group as well, and it's a very active group of students, hopefully all helping each other whilst you're on your own journeys together. And if you did really enjoy that sort of mini condensed version of that mock exam, and you want more of our sort of original content to be able to prepare for this upcoming GAMSAT, if we head to the next slide, we really do encourage you to enroll in our extension intensives that we've launched this week. And they actually start coming this Saturday on the 11th of April, which is when the first class starts. So all of our intensives are 6 weeks long. And what you'll do is you'll of class each week. All of our classes are limited to only 10 students so that you kind of get this very personalized experience with your tutor. And I'm going to drop that link into the chat now. If anyone is interested, and I really suggest that you click that link and you walk through it with me, because on the next slide, if you are not looking to do specific skills on each of the sections, we do encourage you to enroll in our mock exams, which is a full-fledged version of what you just sat, and all of the content is completely original. All of our tutors write it from scratch, and that starts in May. And that will be for 3 weeks in the lead up to the actual May online GAMSAT. And you either choose a Saturday or a Sunday, and you sit the full day mock exam once a week. And then you'll get your individual and your group results, as you guys saw just then, pretty much that week after. So I'm just going to walk you through. If you can click on that link, which will have both the extension intensives and the mock exams, because we've had just a ton of students ask us, how do we actually enroll? Because there's a lot of information on that page. I thought I'd take the opportunity now to just talk you through how you actually enroll. So first, choose which section you want to actually enroll in. From today, I guess you can sort of gauge what you want to improve. We have 4 things. So that's the section 1, section 2, section 3, and just the mock exams. And there's also sort of bundle things where you can choose to do 2 of them, a section and a mock or whatnot. You can mix and match to your own preference. So after you've chosen what you want to work on, head to the next slide. You can choose your tutor, which you guys have all gotten the experience to sit with Sarah today. But very much we have 5 incredible tutors who are all from different med schools and from all different backgrounds. I do encourage you, before you sort of pick your tutor, maybe do read the blog that they've written about themselves, because that's where they explain their background and how they teach each section. And that's very much to help you tailor your experience and get the most out of the intensives, to sort of pick the right tutor for you. And you are also more than welcome to contact them sort of before anything. And then next slide. Someone's just messaged me, will these lessons be on Zoom as well? Yes, given the online nature of sort of the COVID pandemic, all of our lessons will be on Zoom. So the next thing you do after you pick your tutor is we have a schedule up on that link. And so you can see that each intensive and each tutor has their own little slot. So just pick your slot. Someone just asked, how long do the intensives go for? So it's 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. Are these lessons available on different time zones? Yes, if you just let us know in advance, we can record the lesson for you, or we can just sit you in a different time zone, but just let us know what time zone you are from. But all of the time zones up here are the Melbourne, Sydney, Eastern Standard Time Zone. Someone's asked, will these recordings be recorded for viewing again? If you let us know in advance that you can't come in person for that specific week, we can record it for you. We're super flexible like that. Can you send your tutors any questions you like? Sarah just asked that. Sarah, do you want to answer that one?
No, I was saying as in, like, if you are in a different time zone and you feel like if you don't come, like, you might not get to ask the questions you need, you can just like send any questions to your tutors anytime. That was more the only thing. Yeah.
Oh, completely. Yeah. We do understand that there are a lot of sort of different students in different time zones, so feel free to do that. One thing I do want to explain about this schedule, though, that I've gotten a ton of questions about this last week, was what's the difference between the RS, which is re-sitters, and the FTS, which is the first time sitters. So essentially we decided to break those 2 sessions up because some students who are re-sitters already have their sort of experience and strategies going into the GAMSAT, whereas a lot of the first time sitters will be going from scratch. And so that's why we decided to split that up. The real difference is that we just have a different, I guess, assumed knowledge and experience from the resitters. But given that it is now everyone's going online for this GAMSAT, is very much a very small difference. But the content that we teach in both is exactly the same. So if you can't make a first sitter time slot, you can go into the resitter class, and vice versa. They're pretty much the same. So choose a time for your 6-week intake. If you want to also sort of use the mock exams, you can choose a mock exam time, which is on the next slides there. Thank you. So our mock exams are very much either just on a Saturday or just on a Sunday. And as you can see, they're just week after week, starting from that weekend of the 9th of May. So you just either choose the Saturday or the Sunday. Again, if you let us know in advance that you can't make a Saturday, you need to hop onto the Sunday one, just let us know in advance and we can swap you over. But very much the mock exams are right now being created so that they're on the back of each other, and they, again, you get your own progress report in terms of your individual results and then the cohort results, and you can see how you're progressing. On the actual real GAMSAT, you don't have to sit it in this order, but we're sort of getting everyone to sit down and sitting it in this sort of full day timetable to get everyone in that discipline of only having that hour break, and doing section 1 and 2 back to back. Just got a few more questions here. Someone said, will the questions be similar to the real GAMSAT style ones? Given that Sarah is one of the content creators for our GAMSAT mock exams, she can answer that one.
Yeah, great question. So we design our questions based on the GAMSAT and specifically what we think people find quite difficult. So the questions, yes, will be reflective of a standard GAMSAT. We separate our mock exams up with the correct allocations or distribution of different question types for each of the sections, and the same as for the section, the 2 tasks for the essays, and it should be quite reflective of a GAMSAT. At times we might make it a little bit harder because we feel like if you can do something harder and you can get really good at that, then it should be easier on GAMSAT day, but other than that they should be very reflective of the GAMSAT itself.
Cool. To also add on to that question, Sarah doesn't actually know this because she didn't read the feedback from the first section 1 thing that we did. One of the students who sat the section 1 mock exam that we did last summer said that the exam that Sarah wrote was the closest thing that they have sat to the ACER exam. So that is not from me. I've never done the GAMSAT before, but from one of our students themselves. Someone else just wrote, do we get feedback on our own section 2 essays during the intensives? Again, I'll shoot that to Sarah because she is a section 2 tutor.
Yep, so part of the intensives, at least I'm running section 1 and section 2, so we are giving homework each week or take home questions and take home tasks, and each week you will get feedback on your tasks. So if you're writing essays or plans for your task for section 2, which we will have a mixture of both for each week, then yes, you will get feedback on that from your tutor, and we'll also be going through workshopped examples in class that will be your own examples, a bit like I did today, but having more time to do that so everyone can get a turn of getting personalized feedback to what you're doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Next one. For the weekly classes, are the questions all original or will they focus on questions from other sources? That's a content question.
Yeah, no, we write them all. Yeah. So before, in the past, when we were a bit smaller, we would source some of our questions, but now we use them to help guide us with how hard or easy we'll make them, but we write all of our questions ourselves. Yeah.
Cool. Terrific. And then, so you've done those 4 things. You've picked all of your dates, times, and things to hop on to that link and ready to enroll. But also, if we hop on to the next slide, we do highly encourage you to holler a friend completely, because if you sign up with a friend, if you see on the right hand side column of this table, very sorry for the small text, both friends who sign up together, you'll both get a 15% discount off everything, and the reason we've done this is purely because we've seen students who have come through our course before, and if they're doing it with a friend, they're just so much more motivated, and they just progress so much better. And so as you can see here, the way that we've priced the sections is extraordinarily affordable. It comes down to about $10 an hour. So all of the sections are $139 per student for the whole 6 weeks. And for example, all 3 of the mock exams are $159, and then there are package versions if you want sort of a bit more, and then everything is discounted if you enroll with a friend. Just going to answer a few quick questions here that just came up. So the mock exam price is separate to the individual sections. Yes, that's correct. But if you want to purchase a section and a mock exam, there are packages in the orange down there. It's a lot bigger in text size if you hop on the link. Apologies. This might be a dumb question. No dumb questions, Emlyn. How would you correlate percentages during practice exam to percentile overall score for GAMSAT? Maybe, Sarah, can you answer that question at the end?
Yeah, I saw that question and I thought that's such a great question that I get asked all the time. So definitely not a dumb question. This is so hard to know. I have done, back when I did my GAMSAT days, I have done practice exams where I got in the 50s and practice exams where I got in the 90s. And I'm sure that people have had similar experiences where different practice exams, you get different results. And I think the unfortunate thing about practice exams is whilst they can help familiarize you with the style of questions, they can't help you know where you sit comparative to how other people did on that practice exam. And so I wouldn't grab maybe like an ASA pink exam and do it and then say, oh, I got 65%. Okay, I guess that would be around a GAMSAT score of 60, because you just can't know that. So that can be challenging. That's why we like to do our percentile rankings for people, saying that we do say take it with a grain of salt, because we are doing it based on a cohort of people who are already investing in their GAMSAT prep. So you can kind of expect that if you're towards the lower end, you can bump it up a bit. But it's really hard to know just from sitting or doing a practice exam in your own time what a percentile rank will be. And that can be one of the frustrating mysteries of the GAMSAT. I'd say the best thing that you can do is just prepare and familiarize yourself with questions as much as you can and improve at what you can, and you'll be able to see that result there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. Olivia just asked, can I buy just one mock exam? I will answer that in 2 slides time. And so, yeah, just highly encourage you to find, if you're going to do it with a friend, then completely sign up together. And the way that you access that 15% off discount is just by emailing Carleen, and those instructions are in the link that I sent you. Onto the next slide. Usually when I get to here, it's all proceeds do go towards our health education mission over in the Philippines. But given the nature of what's going on right now, that's something that's not going to be able to happen. And actually, we're going to divert all of the funds from this GAMSAT tuition to the COVID-19 response here in Australia. Just to give you context, we started the whole GAMSAT arm of what we do in November of last year, and already we've had 120 GAMSAT students come through, which has raised around $7,000 and taught over 4,000 Filipino students over in rural Philippines. So it's something that we very much thank all of our students for helping us to make that social impact. And we think it's just incredible that we can do that with being able to teach you guys. So I guess onto the next slide, which I'll use to answer Olivia's question. We're super flexible. So all of the sort of schedules and the timetables and the packaging and everything that went up there, if you need anything changed in terms of a day that you can't make, or you don't want to sit 1 week or whatnot, we're super, super flexible. Just email Carleen and she'll make something happen for you. To answer Olivia's question, can you just buy one mock exam? Yeah, sure. Why not? Of course, Carleen will hit you up. So if you just email Carleen, she can make that happen. Someone just asked, thanks for answering my question. When is the incentives? I think he means intensives starting, and what is the deadline for purchasing? So the intensives are starting this Saturday, and the deadline for purchasing is 24 hours before the class starts. So that means for the deadline for the Saturday class will be tomorrow. So just on the back of that, so the next slide, is we're super flexible. Yes. Oh, that answered the question. But you do need to enroll at least 24 hours before the class starts. This just gives the tutors an understanding of who their students are, because they want to get to know you and tailor their class to you as much as you want to get something out of them as well. And to the next slide. Like I said earlier, all of our tutors are extremely dedicated to helping all of our students. And literally just as we were on this, they were saying they wanted to give everyone their Section 2 feedback. So for the next 24 hours, we're going to open up a promo code, and I'll link that sort of below. If you check out using that promo code, they're going to go search up your Section 2 essay and give you your full feedback and email you that. And if you're rewatching this, we'll make sure that that promo code's open from when we send out the rewatching email. So feel free to use that promo code. I guess that is all I wanted to say. I'm going to hop on to the next slide. I'm just going to pause here and make a radical suggestion that in this chat, you have the liberty now to go and privately message anyone. If you don't have a friend that you're going to sign up with, you now have, 40 other members or so left in this chat who might sign up with you, and you can both access those discount codes. So I highly suggest, if you don't already have a friend that you want to sign up with, then hit up someone and you can both get the discounts. We really, don't care who the two friends are, but it truly does help motivate you when you know that someone else is in this with you. So to the final slide, as you guys do that in the back end, are there any last questions, whether for myself, for Sarah, for Colleen? Shoot them through now, or you can shoot them to our emails. Yep, nope, doesn't look like it. Sarah, any last thoughts or words of wisdom for all the students today?
Not really, other than thank you so much for coming. And also, whatever you choose to do from here on out until the GAMSAT, good luck and take care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing all of you in med school, because Eliza's right. I like to have friends and see people exceed and succeed. That's my word I'm looking for. Succeed. Yeah, so that would be my final word of advice and encouragement. Yeah, so thanks everyone.
Beautiful. Someone just quickly asked, where do we punch in the minimock_2 code? After you choose the sessions that you want, there is a thing on the ticketing platform called promo code, and then you can just literally copy and paste minimock_2 there. Make sure it's on capitals though, because that's the only way it will work. Thank you so much, guys. No, thank you guys so much for being with us for the last 2 hours. We truly do hope that you got something out of this. And we do look forward to sort of seeing you soon, whether on the Facebook group, whether in a class, whether at a mock exam. Do let us know how you go. We truly care that, you guys are able to go and achieve those dreams. So thank you so much. And we'll see you all soon. And Grace, yes, you can just email Colleen and then she'll sort that out.
Thanks,
no
everyone.
worries. See ya. Bye.